Hello, this is Bill Webb, aka Billy Indiana. Today I'm going to recap all the games that I played in April 2023. I'll kind of recount them in reverse order in terms of least played to most played, give you a little bit about the stats of the games that I played, talk about some of my favorites, and give a little mini review for each game. If you're curious to see what hit the table at my house this last month, stay tuned. So as I said, I'll recap them kind of in backwards order from least played to most played, but overall the stats are like this. I played 62 gameplays in April. That was helped in large part two things. One, I played a fair bit of games on BGA, Board Game Arena, and then secondly, I had spring break in the middle of the month, which helped a lot. A few game days, I think 3 or 4 game days during spring break, so that helped a lot, getting 4 or 5 games in each of those days, along with regular game nights, and then, like I said, quite a few gameplays on Board Game Arena this month. Of those 62 gameplays, 29 different games and 15 games that were new to me. Hitting the table a lot again, several Stefan Feld games, several Reiner Knizia games, so let's start recapping and give you a little bit of review for each one. First up is Tooth and Claw Animals with Civilization. This is a little card game that I don't own, but a friend of mine brought over and we played. It's an interesting game. It's where you're trying to set out your basically troops in a certain pattern on the table, and it's kind of a trick-taking game, but it's also based on where you place the cards. And you're going to play a card and attack from a certain row in your I think it's a 3x3 grid of cards against the 3x3 grid of another player, and you attack from a certain row and you attack to a certain row of theirs, and then there's a trump color or suit. And so yeah, it's a few details are a little hazy. It's been several weeks since I played it, just played it the once. It was an interesting game. I enjoyed it. Just played it that one time, but it would be one I would be happy to get back to the table if I had a chance. Next up is Tavarua. Tavarua is an interesting game by the same creator of Zaya, I think, or Ja, however you pronounce it, Legend of a Drift System. And so it's a very different game, though. It's a game about surfing. And again, a game that I don't own, but one that I wouldn't be too surprised if at some point ends up in my collection if I could find a good deal on it. I really did enjoy it. It's got an interesting system where part of the game board is you kind of swimming out to hit the waves, and then there's dice rolling, and you're jumping out of that sort of one part of the board to the other part to try to hit the wave. And if you hit it right on the right number, right when it's at its peak, you get bonuses. And then if you can ride it all the way to the shore, you get bonuses. And you have to use a long board for some of the rides and a short board for other rides, and there's limitations and restrictions on that, and there's a little bit of risk. You're flipping over cards that are going to make you either slide forward or backward on your board, and then you play cards to slide forward or backward on the board. And if you're on that long board and you can get all the way out to the tip without falling off, you get a hang 10 bonus, and all kinds of interesting mechanisms. I'm not a surfer, so I didn't necessarily understand all the lingo fully, but I really enjoyed it. It was a fun game, a little bit of card play, a little bit of dice rolling, a little bit of push your luck. A game that I would really enjoy playing again. Another one, Savernake Forest, or Savernake Forest. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's a De Vere game, and this one is another card pattern building game. And so you've got you're trying to build out this path, and you've got different animals, and you've got food to feed those animals, and there can only be one path per animal. And each animal has a certain amount of food they can eat, although you can play other, I forget if it's tokens, I think it was little tokens you put on there that allowed you to say those animals could eat more than normal. And each thing that they ate was worth different amount of points depending on which cards you played. And so you're basically just trying to maximize your points by laying out the cards in a unique pattern. So that was a fun game. I enjoyed that one. Again, don't own it, and a game I'd be happy to play again, but not one I'll probably add to my collection. Next up is Revive, and I've mentioned this one before. This is by Aporta Games, and I didn't own it when I played it the first couple times, but I do own it now, and it's because I've really enjoyed my plays of this game. This is definitely a Euro game with lots to think about. You got card play, and there's a top and a bottom part of the card that you can use, but only one or the other, and so that depends on where you put it on your player board. There's some exploration out on the main board of the central game board, and you can block each other off to some degree, but not entirely. Lots of things going on in this game. Very Euro-y, a game that I've really, really enjoyed, and I'm excited to get this one back to the table hopefully soon. So that is Revive. right here. Let's see if we can maybe get a little corner there showing. All right, so that's Revive. Another one that I just played one time in a game that I don't own but played actually on Board Game Arena is Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is a classic. I actually recently picked up the new version of it, but it was missing some tokens. So I wrote to get the replacement tokens, and those have just come, but I haven't had a chance to play it since those, I think it was coffee tokens that it was missing. And so I got those mailed to me, so now I can play it, but just haven't gotten it to the table. The original Puerto Rico, to be honest, I only skimmed through the rules, and I was trying to kind of figure it out as I went through on Board Game Arena. And there's a lot of things I enjoyed about it. I like the follow mechanism where you pick a particular role and then everybody else gets a lesser version of that role, and vice versa. When other players are the lead player, they will pick a certain role and you get a lesser kind of form of that role. And you're trying to build buildings, you're trying to put out plantations, you're trying to harvest, you're trying to ship and sell, all kinds of different actions you can take. And I didn't ever quite, in that one gameplay, didn't ever quite really seem to get a good kind of synchronous method, or a kind of a good sequential method where I was getting things played in the right order. So I'd like to play it again. I think I actually would probably enjoy that one quite a bit more with the physical board game. So I'm excited to play the new version of it as soon as I can get that one to the table. Next up is another little card game called Only One Collection. And Only One Collection is a set collection kind of game. And it's another one that I enjoyed. I don't own, and I don't have it here to show. I'll just show you a picture here. I enjoyed the number combinations and trying to get the cards collected in a certain pattern. It's, again, not one that I'll definitely be desiring to go back to necessarily, but one I would be willing to play if someone asked me to. Next up, Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is a game that I do own. And Lost Ruins is one that I hadn't played in a while, and I played it last month and really enjoyed it again, and played it this month on Board Game Arena, and a couple times actually. And I like it. I think I would like to play with the expansion of the different asymmetric boards, and that isn't available on Board Game Arena yet. And then there's a new expansion coming out. I think the one was Expedition Leaders that has those asymmetric leaderboards, and then I think the new one is about something about an expedition. So I'm excited to try those. It's a game, again, that still feels to me like there's so much you have to do on the research track. I feel like there was more balance, and maybe it's just me not understanding everything about the game, but it feels like you have to put too much focus on the research track the way it is now. So I enjoy it. Always am happy to play it. But again, it always leaves me a little bit wanting. I like it, and yet there's something it feels like it needs more for me. Maybe if I play with the Expedition Leaders expansion, that will help. I have played it that way once in person with the actual board game, probably over a year ago, when that expansion first came out. And I do remember it feeling better, but I don't own it, so I'd like to get that one back to the table and try it. Next up is another one that I don't own but played at game night, and that is Horseless Carriage by Splatterspellen. And as a typical Splatter game, it is not one that's necessarily attractive. It felt kind of fiddly. There were a lot of things about the little markers that sort of outlined where you were on the board and where you could kind of buy and sell. And there was on your personal boards, it was growing. You kept adding boards to it, and you had to have certain things touching and certain things not touching. And there was a lot of interesting puzzly nature to it that I enjoyed, but there was also a lot of fiddliness to it that kind of took away some of that enjoyment. So it's one that I'd like to get back to the table again to see if being a little more familiar with and a little more confident in the rules would help me enjoy it more. But every time we were putting down those squares and rectangles on the main board and then trying to lift them back up, we're knocking things over and moving things out of their spots and having to leave things out on that board and take some things off and put some things on that stay there. I don't know, there was just a lot of, like I said, fiddly things about it that made it a little less enjoyable for me, although I did like it. So not one that I would probably go out to purchase myself, but one that I'd be happy to play again. In fact, I'd kind of like to play again. I liked the puzzly part of the personal player boards, at least most of that. So I'd like to try that again. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily one of my favorites, but I did enjoy it. Next up on Board Game Arena, we just played a round of golf. And this is where you've got a sequence of cards and you're trying to get lowest score and you're trading cards out, and you can trade them from cards that are visible versus trading them from cards that are not, that are face down. Just an interesting little game. Just got a quick game of that in on Board Game Arena. Also played a Phil Walker Harding game called Gizmos. And again, one I don't own, but played it on Board Game Arena. It's an interesting one where you are basically coordinating your purchasing of these gizmos, these basically little parts that do certain functions. You can enhance the way you pick the marbles out and the way you use the marbles to take certain actions. And it's basically like an engine builder game. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. I don't know that I would go out of my way to buy the game, but it was fun to play on Board Game Arena. And just yesterday, finished a game on Board Game Arena of Farkle. I hadn't played that one in years. It brought back a lot of fun memories. It's probably been 15 years since I played it, or maybe 12 years since I played it. When we lived in Indonesia, we would often take that. My wife kept it in her purse, and if we would go to the restaurant for dinner, we'd often pull out the dice and play Farkle with the kids while we were waiting on the dinner to come. And so it was fun to get that one back to the table and play that one again. Next up, another one that I just played once, and that is Earth. And I've played this a few times on Board Game Arena, and now I've played a couple times with the actual board game. And obviously, to me, playing with the actual board game is far better. And the main reason is it's got also a follow action where you choose an action, everybody else gets a lesser version of that, and when they're choosing their action, you get a lesser version of it, kind of like the Puerto Rico style action. The art is beautiful on the cards. You're making this, I think it's a 4x4 grid of cards, and some of the cards actually, it depends on where they're at in the grid and to how they work, and others it doesn't. And you're also building up little trees and shrubs on those cards, and you're also gathering soil for some of those cards. And so lots of fun thinking about how you can build that engine, how you can kind of combine those cards. And then there's a race for certain objectives. You've got some private objectives, there's some public objectives that you're all going for and racing for, and the sooner you get to it, the more points you earn. So lots of fun things with Earth. I know this has really been hot for a lot of people, and I can see why it's a game that I enjoyed and will be happy to get back to the table when I have the chance. All right, next up is a game I don't own but played for the first time by Stefan Feld, and it is Carpe Diem. And this was an interesting one. It was fairly simple for a Feld game compared to a lot of the ones that I've played. I enjoyed a lot of things about this game, choosing the tiles and trying to pattern them out on your personal player board. And the way you moved on the board where you're choosing those tiles from, and always going left or right, and then you could do certain things to advance your movement or to kind of skip to other parts of the board, but trying to make sure you could get to those tiles before somebody else, kind of keeping an eye on what other people were doing, and then, like I said, building out certain patterns on your own player board, and then having a little kind of along the edge of your player boards, some things, okay, I need to kind of coordinate where this one and this one match and intersect here, and so along this row I need to get this one, and along this column I need to get this one. If I can intersect them and kill two birds with one stone. There's a lot of interesting puzzly nature to it. I tend to like tile laying games and building patterns like that. And so there was a lot of fun with that one. I would like to play Carpe Diem again. Next up, another Reiner Knizia game, and that is Blue Lagoon. Just played this one once. We went out and played pickleball with some friends and played some board games afterwards. And this is one that 4-player game. None of us had ever played it before. I just did a quick teach after having read the rules and watched a video. And I think we played it about 30 minutes. So this is definitely a filler style game. It reminded me a little bit of Babylonia, a bigger game of Reiner Knizia's, in terms of playing your tokens out onto the board and trying to sometimes cut people off, and you're wanting to connect to the different islands, and you're trying to keep the longest chain. There's several things that you're scoring, and it's got 2 parts to it too. In one part, you're kind of laying out your tokens and your little wooden temples, and then in the second round, you bring back all your tokens, but your temples stay out there. And in the first round, you have to branch out from the waterways, but in the second round, you have to branch out from your temples. So kind of a cool 2-wave game, but then at the end of each wave, you score the same way. So you're still trying to get all to the different islands, you're trying to have majority on the different islands, you're trying to collect combinations and sets of the different tokens that are on the board of different resources. And so lots of fun things, a lot of variety in how you can score and go after those points. So Blue Lagoon was a lot of fun. Next up, another game that I do own and just got to the table one time, and that's Arc Nova by Matthias Biggie. And this one, again, it's a longer game, so sometimes it's a little bit harder to get to the table. It's a little bit of setup with all the cards and the pieces. Not terrible, but a little bit. And yet it's still fun. And every time we play it, I have fun. I can't remember if this month we played it on Board Game Arena or if it was a month when we played it live, because we've done both the last couple months. But either way, I've really enjoyed Arc Nova. I would say on Board Game Arena, the implementation is pretty smooth. And you can get in a game a lot faster, but it does take a little bit away from holding those cards and moving things around. I really like, taking the association action and trying to figure out how you can maximize that and which cards to flip over, and yeah, just the engine building nature of that as well. Trying to get both kind of, I always forget the name of the two tracks, but the one track with the tickets and the one track with the reputation of how well you're doing and conservation principles. And so it's fun to work both of those and trying to beat people to certain categories so you can get better advancements or better bonuses. Lots of fun things on Arc Nova, and a game that I just continue to enjoy playing. All right, next one that I played on Board Game Arena and don't own, but it's an Uwe Rosenberg game called Applejack. Another tile laying game where you're trying to build out patterns. And when you put tiles down beside each other, you're trying to get green apples by green apples and red apples by red apples and pink ones by pink ones and so on and so forth. And you're trying to score the biggest cluster for each round, whether it's your turn or someone else. They're just going to keep scoring, and so you can kind of see what's coming up, and you want to build up those to get scoring as you go. But then there's also some in-game scoring where if you have a certain number of the colors all conjoined, then you're going to get bonuses for that. And you also have these little blossoms that earn you points, and then when you put the blossoms on two kind of adjacent sides of the tile, then it's going to give you income. I think it was maybe honey, I forget what that income or that sort of currency was in the game. But Applejack was fun. If you like a pretty simple tile laying game, it's a fun one to try. And the Board Game Arena implementation is pretty nice. Next up is Amsterdam, another game that I just played once, and this is from the City Collection, another Stefan Feld game. I believe it was a remake of Macau. Hadn't ever played Macau, but played this at one of our game group nights and really liked it. There's a lot to think about. There's the moving around up on the top part of the board with your boats and trying to pick up and deliver different items, and then trying to get those items in the bottom part of the board, but also trying to get area majority, but also trying to connect where you're purchasing from so you can get the longest chain. And so there's a lot of little things to think about, and I would love to play it again to try to see if I can maximize those opportunities better. One of the cool things in this one, though, is the way you're going to choose what you do each turn is based on this little rondelle. It's not really, well, it's kind of like a rondelle. It's like a spinning wheel of actions. And you take cubes of certain colors and you put them on there. But if you take 4 brown ones, they go in your 4. And if you take 5 gray ones, they go in your 5. And if you take 1 orange, it goes in your 1. And the next turn, you're going to play the next number that's coming up. And so you're always trying to think about, okay, well, in 2 turns, I really want this color, but in 3 turns, I want that color. And you never want an empty one coming forward, because if an empty one comes forward, then there's some penalties. And so lots of fun things to think about with Amsterdam. Definitely enjoyed that one and would like to get that one back to the table. Next up, a game that I've played a couple times recently. Now we're getting into the games that I've played more than once in the last month. And with the new expansion and the insert into the box, Tapestry is one that hit the table a couple times. I think I played once with the regular game, once on Board Game Arena. And Tapestry is a Stonemaier game by Jamie Stegmaier and art by Andrew Bosley. And it's just, for me, a really fun kind of engine builder, track climbing game. The engine building's kind of slight. There's only certain things that kind of help, but as you're filling out rows and columns on your city grid, it helps you gain resources, and then as you gain more resources, you have more strength to do other actions. So it's a minor engine building. It's more like a track progression game, and maximizing your points on every turn, trying to stretch out your turn as long as you can, and kind of time when you do things. I know a lot of people complain that it's not a civilization game because it doesn't base itself on true historical civilizations, but to me that doesn't matter. It's the mechanisms of the game that really draw me in. And every once in a while, it's kind of fun to just look at, hey, I invented paper, and then after that, I learned how to use a phone, and then we flew to space, and then we invented handwriting, and like some of it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't really matter because it's supposed to be sort of whimsical and fantastic, I guess, that way. So I haven't played with all the expansions yet, and so I'm excited to do that. I have them all and finally organized them all, but I haven't tried. I've tried a few different expansion cards and tiles and things, but I haven't tried that arts track yet, and so I'd like to try a few of those extra expansions that I haven't quite gotten to. Next up, another one that I played a couple times, another Reiner Knizia game, and that's Ra. Ra, this is the new by 25th Century print of this game. Beautiful, and I'm probably going to do a quick board game spotlight of this pretty soon. I've played it a couple times now. Played it a couple times with the new version after not too long ago for the first time ever playing with an original version at Strategicon back in February. And this game is a bidding game, and there's parts of what you're bidding for. These tiles are tiles that you're going to score this round and then they disappear. Other parts are tiles you're going to score this round and keep. Other parts are tiles you're going to not score till the end of the game, but you're trying to build out sequences and patterns, or not really sequences, but patterns of getting 8 different ones and then 3 to 5 of the same kind, and all different kinds of patterns that you're trying to do. And every time you bid, you're not just bidding for the tiles, you're also bidding for the bidding token that's out there. And you're also pushing your luck, because every time you draw a tile out of the bag, if a raw tile comes out, that progresses towards the end. And when you have, I think it was 12, it depends a little on the player counts, but I think it was when the 12th one came out, the round ends. And so if you haven't used all your bids, then you've wasted a round basically in terms of potentially scoring some points. And yet, if you push your luck too far, even with the raws not coming out, you might have disaster tiles come out. So lots of fun things to think about. I'm not typically into bidding auction type games, but this one is one that I really enjoy, and the production is just incredible. So that is Ra, another Knizia game. And another Knizia game, Quest for El Dorado. Now, Quest for El Dorado, I had never played until recently. Had a chance to pick up this one, a used copy, I think at Strategicon. And I think that might have been the same day we played Blue Lagoon. I can't remember for sure. But took it to play with some friends of ours, and it was fun. It's a race game. You're playing cards. There's a little bit of a deck builder aspect to it. And as you're trying to race from the start to the end of this track, and you can change the track every game, and you can buy new cards, like I said, to kind of build your deck up. And at different places on the board, you can get rid of cards within your deck. So lots of fun things in El Dorado, the Quest for El Dorado. And I'd like to play this with some of the expansions, but for now, just having only played that base game. So the Quest for El Dorado, another one played twice. Another one I played twice, and this is one of my favorites, but I hadn't played it in a long time, is Inish. And this is a Christian Martinez game by Matago. My wife and I played once, and this is one of the kind of area control, a little bit head-to-head games that she doesn't necessarily love, but she enjoys it well enough that she's happy to play it every once in a while. So I got her to play it recently, and then I took it to a game day with some friends and taught them. None of them had ever played it as well. And it's really unique because you can go into battle and then just say, you know what, let's not battle after all. Let's go ahead and call it quits. And you can retreat, and there's different, really interesting card play, and there's multiple ways to win, but you have to sort of declare that you're eligible to win before the round ends. And then after the round ends, at the beginning of the next round, you see if you still are able to win, if you still possess one of those win conditions. And so it's a really interesting, almost like, okay, I got check, and then everyone else is trying to see, can we stop them before they actually win at the beginning of the next round. So it's also got some really cool Celtic art, and there's a lot of kind of Celtic history in the rule book as well. So a nice, interesting game. I recently picked up the expansion for it, but it came after we played it with the game group, so haven't had a chance to try that yet. All right, the next up is a Ryan Lockett game that I hadn't played before, and that is City of Iron. This is the second edition, one of its early games, and it's from that same Arzium kind of area, or that Arzium world, in terms of the art and some of the storyline. And in this one, it really is about gathering resources and trying to maximize your points each round. I think you score in the 3rd, 5th, and 7th round, if I remember correctly. And you're scoring for things like demons in a bottle and like these fuzzy little animals, I forget, turnips, all these different weird things. And depending on which version of the game you play and how many players you have, you might be scoring more if you're ahead, or you might just be scoring more if you have a certain number of them. It played kind of both ways. It felt a little bit limited in that there's a lot of things you can do, but most of them don't necessarily, at least in the 2 plays that I played. Again, there's, I'm sure, a lot more that I can learn if I play more. It just seemed like there was a lot of things you could do, but many of them didn't necessarily help you work towards winning. That you kind of really had to focus on a couple things to win. And so it was easy to get distracted by all these other fun things to do when they didn't necessarily seem to help you that much. So, I don't know. I need to play a little bit more to see if I maybe oversimplifying it in my brain if maybe I'm missing some connections that are really there. But of all the Red Raven games that I've played so far, I would say this is probably my least favorite. I'm not sure if this will stay in the collection or not. I'd like to play it a little bit more before I make that decision. Some of his games I've really loved. And in fact, recently we played Empires of the Void 2, also played Ancient World. Really enjoyed both of those games. I've liked Islebound, I've liked Above and Below, I love Sleeping Gods. So lots of his games that I've really enjoyed. And I think this one just kind of let me down just a little bit. Maybe I had my hopes up too high. So I'd like to play it again and see if it was, maybe I just wasn't quite catching everything that I should have been catching. All right, next up is another new one to me that I got to play a couple times, and that is Coimbra. Now, Coimbra had a friend come over, and he taught me how to play. And then after that, I took it to game night and taught my game night friends how to play. I really like Coimbra. This game is a lot of fun. It's a dice drafting game, but when you choose the dice, you're thinking about both the color and the number. Because you're going to use the number to help you bid for cards, and sometimes there's a card you really, really need. And other times you just want a particular, basically any card in a certain row, because the cards come out differently every game. But then the color matters too, because towards the end of the round, you're going to use the color to advance on the income tracks. And you might be advancing in terms of shields with how many soldiers you have, or in your income truly for money, or other ways how far you can go out on the track and visit the different monasteries. So there's all these different ways that at the end of the round you're advancing on based on the cards that you've picked up. And you can also, there's a little bit of engine building with some of the cards where they give you different bonuses. So some are just like a one-time bonus. Others kind of build up as you go. And then there's others that are just in-game scoring. So lots to think about in how you choose the dice and which dice you choose and when you choose those dice and which aspects of the game you decide to work on to maximize your score. But I really enjoyed Coimbra. This is one of my favorite new games. So excited that I got a chance to learn it and play it. All right. And then next up, what do we have? All right, another one that I don't own, and that is Amerigo, another Stefan Feld game. And I played it with the actual board game in our game group, and then I also played it on Board Game Arena just one time. So another one that I played twice. This one's really a fun game. It feels a bit different. There's a little bit of a race aspect to it, where you're racing out to these different islands. There's some area control, or area majority and area control, where you can try to cut people off and try to fill in islands with your own buildings. But there's these pirates or barbarians that are coming, and so you got to decide, am I going to try to fight them off, or am I going to, just let them, rattle me and steal from me? And sometimes it might be worth it. The first time I played, I basically ignored them until the very end and just let them hammer me. But I wasn't really losing that much each round, and by ignoring that, I was able to maximize points on others. And I think I got second place by just a couple of points. Almost entirely ignoring them. And then the next game, I actually tried to focus quite a bit on them, and I didn't do nearly as well. I think I was too focused on them. So there's a balance there that I need to figure out. But I enjoyed every aspect of this game. There's, again, kind of a wheel where you're looking at, okay, your first one's the blue, and then the black, and then the different colors. And for the blue one, you're choosing to move your ships around the board, and the black one is where you can load up your cannons to fight off those pirates. But when you do choose those colors, you're putting these cubes down through this tower, and you never know how many are going to come out. And the number of cubes of the same color that is highest determines how many actions you can take. And then the colors that come out determine which actions you can take. So it's an interesting combination there. There's several tracks you're trying to build up on. Also in that first game, I did build up on, I forget the name of it. There was a track. It's the one where you get to build up on the technologies. I forget the name of that track. And I just maximized that track. And in the second game, I didn't even score any points in that, which hurt me quite a bit. I think on the BGA implementation, it's a pretty nice implementation. You can see a lot, but I think I was forgetting a lot that you maybe notice a bit more when it's all out in front of you on the board instead of having to scroll up and scroll down and switch views. And it's just maybe not quite as easy and intuitive on BGA to see everything and to remember everything. Even though it's really easy to play, I feel like just having everything out in front of me on a game like that was a lot better. So I really enjoyed Amerigo and would like to play that one again. Again, I don't own it, but had a good time with it. A game that I played 3 times, and this is the last one that I actually own, and that's Mandala Stones by Philippe Gloats. It's a board and dice game. This is a nice little abstract game. Its production kind of reminds me of Azul, but you've got this board with all these circular tiles that are like the square Azul tiles, that nice acrylic, really colorful, and with nice designs on them. And they are stacked on this one board, and then there's these wooden kind of columns on that same board, and you're moving the wooden columns around to choose which of those circle tiles you're taking, and then the ones you take you put on your player board, and then you can choose to pick them from that center board and put them on your player board, or you can score the ones you've accumulated on your player board. And there's 5 different ways to score on your player board depending on where you put those tiles. But once you put tiles down on the player board in one of those 5 stations, you can never add to that station until you score them and remove them later. And so it's an interesting game about choosing when to score and what to score and watching what other people are doing. And out on the central board, every time you take the tiles off, there's 2 central boards, one where you take the tiles from and put them on your board, and one that when you score them from your board, you put them on the score track board. And on the score track board, there's bonuses as well. So sometimes you want to kind of, maybe it's not maximizing your score from your player board, but you're going to get several bonuses on that central scoring board. So lots of things to think about. There's also in-game objectives, and you have 2, and you're kind of shooting towards both of them, but you can only score 1. So an interesting mechanism of several different mechanisms in terms of pattern building and timing. So a nice little abstract game, pretty quick. We played it several times, and it's usually about a 30-minute game for anywhere from 3 or 4 players is what we played with it. So that's Mandala Stones. Now the last few here I only played on Board Game Arena, and so one is It's a Wonderful World. And I played once with some folks from my game group, and then I played once with Jeff from Foster the Meeple and Dave from Board Game Dave, and that was fun to play with those 2 guys. And then I played a couple times solo. After I played those 2 guys, I was trying to figure out what are some things I'm not quite understanding. So I played a couple solo games after that to see if I could pick up on some of the different combinations there. It's a nice engine builder. I don't own that one, and so it's one that I enjoyed playing on Board Game Arena. Next up is a Matthew Dunstan game called Next Station London. And Next Station London is a kind of a flip and right. You're flipping cars and you're building these subway channels all over the board. And I've actually got a solo playthrough, a BGA solo playthrough on my channel if you want to check it out. I'll try to remember to link it up here. But if you like roll and writes, it's a nice one. It plays really quick. The Board Game Arena implementation is really nice. And I played that one 6 times in the last month. I played with the folks from my game group. I played with Bryce and Allison from Better Half Reviews. Played a couple solo rounds, including the one that I recorded. So Next Station London, a fun little roll and write or flip and write game. Next up, I played Acropolis 8 times. And I played it a couple times with the actual board game that my friend owns. And then I played quite a few times on Board Game Arena, including, again, another solo playthrough. So if you'd like to see that, again, I'll try to remember to link these up here on the video. But Acropolis is a nice multi-layer tile laying game. And again, I enjoy tile laying games. It feels like Cascadia in that each different color of tile scores differently, like the bears and the trout and the hawks in Cascadia. And then it also feels like King Domino in that certain tiles have little stars on them, and you're only going to score the colors that you have stars for. So if you want to score your blue tiles, you have to have blue stars. If you want to score purple tiles, you have to have purple stars, like having the crowns on the tiles in King Domino. But you can also build upward, and anytime you cover tiles, the ones you've covered are no longer valuable, but if they're white, the white tiles, then you actually get stones, and stones give you more power to choose from the row of tiles that are available to you. So it's a fun game of maximizing your points and figuring out which patterns you can build, and sometimes hate drafting. And so if you want to see my solo playthrough, you can check that out. And then the last one, the game that I played 10 times, it's been an alpha on Board Game Arena, so I know not everybody can play it yet. I didn't actually realize what that meant exactly when I made my solo playthrough, but if you want to see how the game plays, again, you can check out on my channel. I have that Board Game Arena solo playthrough. But until it comes out of alpha, a lot of people aren't going to have a chance to play it yet. And I played it with people from my game group several times and played it on solo, or played a solo form of it several times. It's like Next Station London, but I think it's a little bit trickier. The rules aren't really any harder, but they're just different enough that I feel like it's harder to do well. And so it maybe a little bit, feels like maybe a little bit more push your luck, and there aren't as many objectives. And sometimes if you get objectives that just don't mesh well, it can be really hard to score well. So I enjoyed it. I think I probably enjoy Next Station London just slightly better. Maybe it's just because I'm not as good as Next Station Tokyo. I'm not sure, but I played that one quite a bit. And again, if you want to see what it's like so that when it comes out of alpha on Board Game Arena, you can try it. Or if you really like the way it looks, you could order the physical board game if you'd like as well. So there we go. That was 62 gameplays, 29 games, 15 that were new to me this month. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some surprises. The game that surprised me the most, my best game or my favorite game that was not new to me, one that I brought back to the table, and then my favorite game that was new to me. So first, the surprise of the month, and it's not one that I have, but Tavarua is a game that really impressed me. It just was so unique. Thinking about surfing and having to swim out and trying to catch the wave at just the right time, and can I ride this wave all the way to the shore? And what if a barrel wave comes, and do I want to bail out, or am I going to risk it and push my luck? Just lots of fun things. It was a surprise to me. It wasn't quite up there where it was in the top games, but it was close. And so when I was thinking, what was my favorite new game? Of the 15 I played, it was in the top few. And so I did have to kind of recommend it as a surprise to me because I thought it looked cool and sounded fun, but it really was a lot more fun than I expected. So the surprise of the month, Tavarua. Now, the best game to me for one of the older games that I was bringing back to the table, it kind of goes back and forth for me in my brain because Revive was one that I really enjoyed, but that's one I picked last month, and so this month I'm going to give it to Inish. Inish is actually, like I said, one of my favorite games of all time. Just, it's so unique in the way it plays. There's a few games now that have tried some things similar to this, and Christian Martinez has a new one, Galactic Renaissance, I think, that was recently on Kickstarter that's coming out. That's sort of a spiritual successor to this in space. So I'm excited to try that when that becomes available. But Inish is going to be my favorite game that was not new to me that came out this month. And then for the best game new to me, there were a couple of Feld games that were in the running. Amsterdam and Amerigo were in the running. But in the end, if I can find it here, in the end, I have to go with Coimbra. Coimbra was my favorite new game, just edging out Amerigo, just edging out Amsterdam. Both really great games that I loved a lot that were new to me. But Coimbra takes the cake. I just really like the way the dice work, and you have to think about it in two different ways. And I played the game well both times. I'm sure I was a little bit lucky because I was still learning the rules, but everyone was learning the rules pretty much too. So that may have impacted a little bit that I was able to score well both times, but I think it was more just the combination of things to think about and the way the dice work. So Coimbra, my favorite new game of the month of April 2023. So there you go. Those are my favorite games. What was your favorite game in April? What was a favorite game that was new to you? What was a favorite game that wasn't new that you got back to the table? Maybe a classic that you've loved and just haven't played in a while. And then if you have questions or comments about any of these games that you saw that I've mentioned, let me know what you think about these games as well, especially if it's Tavarua or Revive or Inish or Coimbra, some of these of my favorites. Let me know what you think about those games as well. As always, thanks for watching. This is Billy Indiana, signing off.